definitely don't envisage a world or would expect a world where 100% of teachers are making 100% of resources from scratch. That is not desirable. But you are going to get, in any given school, a percentage of people, or in any given, set of maths teachers, a percentage of them who are massive losers, like everyone who's in this podcast, who really, really love thinking about maths teaching and making resources, and that's what they're really passionate about. And for that subset of people, they should be learning how to do this so that they can make resources of a really high quality.
Well, it gives me tremendous pleasure to welcome back, I'm going to say fan favourite to the Mr. Barton Maths podcast, the fantastic Kris Boulton. And we've got a new recruit this time. Forget Lee Wheeler, he's gone. We've upgraded. We've got Duncan Grantham with us. So firstly, hello, Kris. How are you, mate?
Doing really well. I think that's going to break Lee's heart when he says
I know. It's good. Just leaves him wanting more. It's good. It's good. He needs to up his game. That's good. And Duncan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
Fantastic. Right, we'll come back to you in a sec, Kris, but Duncan, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. I'm Duncan. I am a maths teacher, and I'm also deputy head at a Twickenham school, which, if anyone knows it, is actually not quite in Twickenham. It's in Witton. It's had some troubles over the years, and it's had a few rebrands, but now we're a very, very happy, very successful school that's, on the end of our turnaround journey. So I think that's really exciting. In terms of a bit about me, my career, I've been teaching 12 years. I did teach first up in Manchester. I taught at a school called Denton Community College for a while, which some people might know. So I was there for 2 years, and then I became second in department at another school in Manchester in Wythenshawe. I was there for another couple of years, and I've been at my current school about 7 years now. Came as head of maths. Was probably, I think, quite good at that. I was briefly a very bad head of year, less successful at that. And I've been in my current role for about 1.5 years. But throughout lots of that time, I've been very interested in making resources through sort of different, avenues. And I am currently obsessed, I would say, with using AI to code all kinds of things for me. But I suppose in the context of this, maths resources.
Excellent stuff. Fantastic. Well, it's been a while since I've been able to do this, the math speed dating question, because I tend to have recurring guests on the show, but this is nice for me. So let's do the big three. So first, favourite number and why?
My favourite number is 16, and there are two reasons why. The first is because when I was a very small child and you're first sort of becoming aware of maths, as it were, 16 was the kind of number that just was obviously had lots and lots of factors to me. It's the kind of number I could rattle through in my sort of like very, I only knew the 2 and 3 times tables, but could suddenly sort of see what numbers fitted into it. So I thought it always interested me. But also when I was younger, these stupid games, you'd be like, playing families or whatever. The role that I would always play was 16-year-old brother, which at the time, as a very young child, seemed incredibly sophisticated to me. And now, as someone who spends all day around 16-year-olds, and I realise even the best of them, even the most incredible and mature, they're also very, very young and gormless. So it always resonates with me, thinking what being age 16 used to mean to me and what it means to me now. So that's why I'm picking 16.
Good answer. Fantastic. How about your favourite topic in maths as a student?
Yes, but I suppose I don't know, I guess the glory days for me of maths was that first year of maths A level, AS level maths, where you're not doing baby GCSE stuff anymore. It feels like proper maths for the first time. And I remember coming across, differentiation and integration. It felt like, yeah, this is meaty, this is proper. So that was my favourite topic, I think.
Fantastic. And what job would you like to do if you weren't involved in education?
So I'm a pretty good amateur musician. I spend a lot of my free time, I have an increasingly extensive collection of drum machines. So I like to tinker around with them. I like to play with them. I also like to, and I guess this might come up, but I like to write bits of code to program my drum machines. So if I could turn that into a career, that would be amazing. But
I'll tell you what I'm doing. You could be the missing link here, Duncan, because we've had many many guests over the years. This has been their thing. They wanted to be musicians. So you've got Dylan William. I think he plays a bit of bass. Tom Sherrington's on the piano. When I was in Australia recently, I did a bit of playing the piano with Ollie Lovell singing, and Ollie Lovell's a very, very good singer. But I don't think we've had a drummer, so you're in. You're in the band.
I play the piano, but I collect drum machines. I wrote a musical when I was about 18.
Oh,
which was,
right, you're too good. Forget it.
Good,
You're not in the
so,
band. You're out of the band. Forget it. Or yeah, you can go. So you can be a solo artist by the sound of this. Very good. All right. Last question is favorite failure. So something in your career that didn't perhaps go according to plan, but you learned a valuable lesson from it.
So I'm going to go a little off piece here. I'm going to give you three, but I'll be quick. And I'm going to give you three because I think all three of them are relevant and they all inform what is currently driving me and motivating me at the moment. So I'm going to give you three. So the first one is a failure as a university mathematics student. Now, like lots of people who've become maths teachers, I was good at maths at school. I enjoyed maths at school. I would say I blitzed through GCSE maths and I blitzed through A-level maths, found it very easy. I guess I didn't really ever have to study to be successful at maths. Until towards the end of my second year of university. And all of a sudden, I couldn't do it. I had no idea what was, I just realized I had no idea what was being said to me. I just found it, incredibly, incredibly difficult. And I wouldn't have used this language at the time, but what I now realize is that actually at university you're being taught, or at least I was taught in a very discovery learning kind of way. And I was basically being told to go and discover things that were incredibly difficult. Now, that had probably been the case throughout my educational journey as a sixth form or as a first year student, but my own level of maths was probably good enough to just intuit it. But I hit a certain threshold. I was like, I cannot do this without it being explicitly explained to me. And maybe we might say that actually at university that's appropriate because we're trying to breed research mathematicians. Maybe, I'm not sure. That's not the purpose of this conversation. But the point is I really, failed my final university pretty badly. Luckily, I had enough kind of, credit in the bank to pass my degree. And I did a dual honours degree in maths and philosophy. So that was boosting me up a bit. But the experience that it gave me when I went straight into teaching was super valuable because I think I had an experience admittedly at a certain level that is what it's like for a lot of our students as year sevens, as year eights, as year nines, being asked to do maths that they completely do not understand. And then I was a trainee teacher, you were encouraged to do discovery learning, right? So you're sort of like, right, let's try and make these people who have no idea what I'm talking about figure it out for themselves. So that's failure number one. But it informs a lot of what I believe about teaching now. Failure number two came, I guess, but it was about 3 years into my career. So it was in my first few weeks at my second school that I taught at as a second in department. And the school that I'd moved to, behaviour was very challenging. It was special measures, or went into special measures, I should say. But, a challenging school. And we'd been given this task to do with the students, which involved basically them sort of tallying up what they've got on a particular assessment, and they had to get their papers out and they had to say, right, what were their AO1 marks, what were their AO2 marks, what were their AO3 marks? And they just couldn't do it. But I can't really describe to you and the lesson was chaos. In terms of the behaviour, probably one of the worst experiences of my teaching career. But when I left that lesson and really reflected upon it, what I had realised was that, and again, it goes back to that direct instruction thing, the clarity of my instructions, the way I'd broken it down for them, I was presenting this incredibly complicated kind of grid of, right, you've got to put this here, and then you put this there, and then you color code this, and it's super, super complicated. So I think it was probably one of the first times I'd ever come across the impact of not managing cognitive load in quite such an extreme way, but also I was at a point in my career where I was able to begin to articulate and narrate what was going on and why it was causing that level of failure. And because the behavior was so bad, it really inspired me going forward to just break stuff up a lot more, just a lot more, really robust structure. So that's failure number two. And my third and final failure came about 2 years ago. So as I mentioned, I've been head of maths at the school I'm now a deputy head at. And we had, for a relatively large period of time, a really, really, I would say, amazing maths department in terms of the quality of teachers. Really, people who really cared, were really invested. And we all spent a lot of time talking about pedagogy. We really, really learnt to teach in the same way. What we didn't do in any way is make resources or turn any of our amazing knowledge into a set of resources that other people could pick up. We didn't, make it sustainable in any way. And we were getting really amazing results, right? Now, there was a year where suddenly, for all very legitimate reasons, all of those people left that had established this way of teaching and established this way of working and worked really, really well together. We suddenly got in a new cohort of teachers who, for whatever reason, were less experienced. We had people who were coming from abroad, not familiar with the UK education system. And we weren't, or I wasn't, as the leader of that department, able to give them anything and say, right, here's an amazing curriculum that you can pick up and just follow it. And all the knowledge that's in my head about how we're going to teach this and how we're going to break that up and what the appropriate apply phase task is, all of that knowledge was completely implicit. So when those people left, it left with them. And as a result, the results really, I'm not saying they collapsed, that would be too extreme, but the results really went down. And there's one class in particular that I think about all the time where not a single student passed maths in that class. And that it bothers me to this day, because if we had had an incredible suite of curriculum resources that we could have just given this member of staff who was not an experienced teacher, had come from a different education system, if we could have just given him something and said, just use this in this exact way, I guarantee you we wouldn't have had 100% failure rate in that class. And so much of what the reason I mentioned all those three failures is because so much of what I'm trying to do with my sort of making AI coded resources is to make these heavily kind of atomized, direct instruction style suite of curriculum resources that whatever happens in the life of a department or the life of a school, we are at least to some extent mitigating for the slipperiness and the waviness of the stuff that can happen. So sort of rambled on a little bit there, but that's three failures that I think give an insight into my journey and why I'm at where I'm at and why I'm trying to do what I'm trying to do.
Great answers. And I certainly can relate to all three of those, Duncan. That's great. And that gives a nice kind of lead in as to, why you want to do the things that you want to do that we'll talk about in a few minutes' time. So that's fantastic. Kris, just over to you. So we last spoke before the summer holidays. Still absolutely loving the Unstoppable Learning newsletter. I'm going to say my favorite Substack. Everyone's on Substack these days, but I'm absolutely loving yours.
Yeah.
What I'm particularly liking about it at the moment is I think you opened up the chat function or something, and people have been coming in with questions left, right, and centre, and you kind of build in examples into the newsletters. So do you want to give us a little bit of an update about what you've been up to in the last few months? And also everybody wants a book update as well.
Of course. Substack, I'm a little behind on posts. I need to get more out there, but I've got ideas for 2 or 3 series that I'm pretty excited about. One, which is something we often talk about when we're speaking with schools and trust now, inspired by Lee Wheeler, will speak from the perspective of the endemic problems that teachers are facing every day. So some good examples include, I don't get it, sir, versus I never get it. That's a bit different, isn't it? What's the point in doing this? I never get it. I don't got a maths brain. Error, but sometimes, this is too easy. What else have we got? What's the point of learning this when I'm ever going to need it? It's one of my favorite ones to unpack. I think, can't remember if Lee talked about the headache aspirin framework when he was on here. That's one of my favorite out of 4 things that we do. There's, what else we got? I could do it in the class, but not in the exam. What a killer. I didn't know where to start. I've never been taught this before. It's one of my favorites. I swear I've never been taught how to find the area of a triangle before, says the year 11. And I believe them. And why do they always forget? Anyway, it's interesting to go down these list of things because every single one of them, when you pick them out, they have a cause, they have a reason. Therefore, there is a solution. And I guess we're saying we have a solution baked into the system that we have. So that's one idea for a series. Another one, which is related to this conversation, we want to just solve negative numbers, negative arithmetic. I'm sick of it. It's dead easy. It's dead easy, and no kids can do it, and I'm frustrated. And it's quite compact. When I say it's easy, it's not only easy to learn, it's not only easy to do, it's actually reasonably easy to solve for. So if we picked up fractions instead, fractions is enormous. I mean, it's not necessarily more difficult. It's going to take us a lot longer to pick that one up. If you ever looked at Naveen do her workshops on the negative number fraction programs in connecting math concepts, it's like 200 lessons or something. God, there's so much you can do with it conceptually. Not quite so much, I think, with negatives. So we'll try that, and I thought maybe AI could help me with that. I guess we'll come to this later. But also thinking of putting that as a bit of a deep dive under the platform. Got a deep dive plan for ratio. And what else we got? I think we talked last time, did we not, with Lee about the pilot tutoring program we had over the United States? Talked about that. So I'm thinking of putting some of the early stuff from that live. We've now got a few people in England who are just trying it out with their kids first, friends mostly. The latest one is Neil Gilbride going through it with his daughter, and I think she's 10. And he's been sending me the most absolutely heartwarming feedback. They're absolutely loving it. It's up to week 3 now. We'll see whether or not they make it all the way up to integration, differentiation at the end. It'd be good fun if they do. And then other than that, just a bit of an explosion in people reaching out to us to work with us directly. Some of that thanks to you, Craig. Thank you for spreading the good word across the world. So
10%.
It's coming your way. We've had, we've one end, people reaching out from New Zealand and Australia and the Middle East, and then going all the way through to the other end, where there's a few of us, not all of us, here in England, some in America, fingers crossed to try and kick off something pretty big over the state of Oregon, and then several other trusts here in England as well. So that's taking up a little bit of time at the moment, which brings us to the book update.
Last time it was definitely coming out April. I've got you on record there. Yep.
I did. I may have asked the publisher for an extension.
I mean, you didn't say which April, so you've got a bit of wiggle room there.
I'm glad I didn't. I really wanted to come out ASAP. The other problem I've run into at the same time is, so we're tech enabled now. We've got a platform, which is what's helping us reach out at scale. We're starting to do a lot of work migrating content to it. And I think it is a lot better than what's in the early draft of the book is part of the issue. So I'm sort of caught between, let's just go with what we have in the draft manuscript, and it's fine for the book to be imperfect and get it out there because a lot of people are waiting, versus take what we've learned from this and put it in there. There's definitely some updates that we needed. There's no reference in the early manuscript that you read on routine atomization, conceptual atomization. The distinctions aren't in there. I think we need to put those in. So it needs a little bit of headspace, and the growth and all the other things we keep piloting are not giving me the headspace right now. But we'll keep you posted. I really want to get it out there, get it done. It's done.
Just as a slight tangent on this, and we'll promise to come back to you, Duncan, but I've been, listeners may know, and I'll have plugged this in the intro, so listeners definitely will know, I'm in the midst of writing 16 books in 16 weeks. And I'll tell you what has helped me, Kris, this is the key to it, right? So when I wrote my 3rd book, the Tips for Teachers book, I'll reflect on this. I think I'll write about this at some point, because it was a bit of a disastrous process for me, because I'd write it, I'd send the draft off to the publisher, and then I'd visit 2 schools that week, and all of a sudden I'd think, oh no, I wish I'd say that. So then I'd be messaging the editor, can we just change this? Can we just change that? And I did that for about 2 or 3 months. And it was just, I mean, I'm still happy with the book, but you can see that had I had time to, think it through and start again. Whereas what's nice about these books, I made a deliberate decision not to visit any schools whatsoever whilst I'm writing them. So it's just, I've kind of drawn the line. So I'm not going to gain any new knowledge. It's all just going to go in these books. They're going to go out there, and then I can draw a line under that and then go back on the road. And it's making a big difference to my kind of clarity of thinking, and I'm not having to redraft things and stuff, because a book's never perfect, right? It's never finished.
Yeah,
the more you read, the more you learn. It's not the best medium for getting things out there in that sense, because it's in black and white, it's in print and stuff. So it's an interesting one, isn't it?
The writing process is interesting. I mean, I definitely thought, how hard can it be? It's just a long blog post, right? Combined with there is a book that I wrote years ago, How to Start on Teach First Maths in 2013. Basically got that out over the Easter holidays. I think the difference with this one is it's which you'll have experienced, because I know the size of how I wish I'd taught maths. There's just too many bits and pieces at the front and the end. And then you start rereading things, and you're basically rereading hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I need to get better at this. You're an inspiration. 16 books in 16 weeks. It's
Well,
extraordinary.
it might be quantity, not
I
quality.
need
That
that
might be what
talent.
I'm going for there. So we'll see. Right. Anyway, Duncan, let's come to you. So, I've been really looking forward to this chat for a long time because I have been doing two things. One, for 20 years, messing around with resource creation, and then particularly over the last, 2 years, 18 months, and then going kind of crazy with it over the last 6 months, trying to get my head around AI resource creation. And I've written various Substack newsletters on it, and they've had a real mixed response, right? Because this kind of gets to the heart of what I want to talk to you about, because some people think this is amazing for the teaching profession because you can get some real high quality resources out with the right kind of prompt. And some people think this is the death of the profession because it's cognitive outsourcing in its purest form. You just, chat GPT's whizzing out any old nonsense. Teachers are just running with it. So I want to dive into a number of things, either in this conversation, but also hopefully over a series of conversations. I definitely want to dive into the practicalities of doing it, because I know my listeners love practicalities, but I also want to get a little bit philosophical as we're doing it as well. So to kick things off, I want a little brief history of your resource creation before AI. What were you doing that? Were you someone who was downloading off Tez, off Joe Morgan? Were you creating your own PowerPoints and worksheets from scratch? Where does it sit for you, resource creation, Duncan?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, resource creation has always been, AI or other, a very integral part of how I think about teaching and what I am interested in. And I think, different people are good at different things in teaching, and we need, a variety of skill sets. But what I have always been at every level of my career, I think, to bring to the department is a resource creator, right? It took me a long time to nail behavior management, and I'm still learning about school leadership. But I think resource creation has always been, right up there for me. So in terms of, I suppose, the specific journey I've been on, the first time I ever really played around with, and a kind of, I guess, proto version of what I'm doing now, is in my very first year of teaching, when I guess it's still popular, but Times Tables Rockstars was like the big thing at the time. And I had a very, very, very good tops at year 7 class who just, we were saying as a school we want to do times tables rock stars, but basically they just knew their times tables so well it was essentially a waste of time. So the first things I ever sort of custom made, as it were, completely from scratch, were little Excel generators to make a times tables rock star style thing, but with the 17 times tables or the 18, more difficult things like that. And that led me for a while to just, and I should say my dad's a computer programmer as well, so I do have some background in this, not super advanced, but so yeah, I was just playing around with getting Excel to make me little generators and stuff, and then suddenly MathsBot became the thing, and I thought, right, I'm not going to waste my time doing that. But I had basically made a really, really rubbish version of MathsBot, it kind of in Excel in like my first year of teaching, and that.
And sorry, Duncan, on this, you're using this kind of whole class. This isn't kind of kids on one-to-one devices. This is kind of a whole class teaching tool.
No, yeah, exactly. So yeah, so I'd be making like something that looked like a Times Tables Rockstars booklet, but with the 48 times tables or whatever it might be, that kind of thing. So that's my first experience. Kind of going forward a little bit, and I guess the bit that's most relevant maybe to where I'm at now is in my first year or so as a head of department. So I became a head of maths in 2019, and that was probably around the time when I really started thinking, but also like listening to, for example, your podcast, and started reading a lot more about what was going on in maths teaching. And one of the things that really drove the performance in our maths department was really, really thinking about teaching for depth. And so what we did was fairly laboriously made a very small number of customized PowerPoints where we'd pick like one topic each and really nailed them in like crazy amounts of depth, right? So we do, and they still exist, they're not bad. We had a unit of work about parallel lines where we'd gone into like every possible sinew of this, and I think I made one about factors, multiples, and primes, where we'd gone through like every possible definition and every multiplication. So we'd spent ages making stuff, but being completely honest about it, although the resources were great, it would take you like 30 hours to output about 6 hours worth of teaching, which just proportionally is not sustainable. If you've got whatever, a couple of hundred objectives across a 5-year scheme of work. So I think I was super interested. I've always been super interested in resource creation. I'd made loads of resources, but I'd never been able to. The goal for me was always, can I do this at scale somehow? Can I find a way of, making things that are completely bespoke to what I am trying to achieve?
Yeah.
That little tiny piece, that exact thing I want 58 questions on. And for periods of time, I just did it manually, but you just can't do that for everything. I think in terms of how I got to specifically using latex rather than like ChatGPT in a general sense, was just literally through chance and a little bit of frustration. So when ChatGPT, I think I first started using it probably end of 2022, maybe start of 23, when it first was, kicking around a little bit. And I was probably a pretty early adopter. And I, was definitely immediately kind of playing around with, just getting it to write me the kind of questions that I could then like dump into PowerPoints and stuff. I think it probably can do it now, but at the time, it had sufficient visual limitations that it couldn't even display exponents properly. It couldn't do like a vertical fraction. Frustration with that led me to just sort of doing a bit of research around, well, what are good, electronic ways of quickly generating things that look mathsy? Because there are, for example, in Word, some listeners may know that it's got like a Visual Basic plugin that sits behind it that I did try and play around with, but I just found that way too complicated for the use case I was looking for. I think PowerPoint does something similar, but nothing was ever super simple. And then completely, like truly randomly, I had a very, very, very gifted year 10 at that point student, a really, really nice Turkish kid who was definitely a maths genius. And basically, he always wrote me his homework as latex code. That's how he handed it into me. So that's how I came across it. And I thought, this is what I've been looking for. And so that sort of little spark of, right, I'm going to get ChatGPT, as it was then, I'm now using Claude more, but get ChatGPT, get a large language model to write me latex code. So kind of, I've always been interested in resource creation, a little bit of luck and just frustration with both how laborious is it to do stuff totally manually yourself, and also a frustration with what I think is out there in the world. Like there should be, at this stage, better stuff that exists, but it turns out there doesn't, because it's actually quite hard.
That's really interesting. Now, we've definitely spoke both, I think, in the conversations I've had with Kris and Lee, but also in some that I've had with Neil Almond on AI in particular, about your process of getting Claude or ChatGPT, or I tend to use Gemini to spit out latex, then banging it into Overleaf, and then before you know it, you've got a really nice looking worksheet or potentially PowerPoint or presentation. It's absolutely fantastic. So if listeners, I'll link to it in the show notes and posts I've written, and obviously I'll link to your website on that. That's brilliant background. Thank you, Duncan. Let me bring you in here, Kris. What's been your history with resource creation? I'm interested in, but also I know you've been messing around with AI and experimenting over the last year and so just give us a bit of background on that.
Yeah, so I think when it first came out, when we're using ChatGPT 3, 3.5, it was wildly unusable, basically. You'd ask it for a set of Pythagorean triples, and it would give you numbers that are just evidently not Pythagorean triples.
Yeah.
You'd ask it to draw you right-angled triangles, and it would send you an image of something you thought was from a circle of hell. It couldn't even do basic arithmetic right. I think a lot of those problems are solved now, and you can trust it. You can ask it to do fairly rudimentary maths problems for you, and it will give you the answers, and you can largely just lift them and go and don't have to double check them. So I've probably come at it from the perspective of resource creation. It's probably very similar to Duncan's experience. There is nothing out there today that really I find like satisfying, that gives me what I want. And what do I want? I want from in the first instance, I want logically faultless communication. There's a wonderful case study we'll probably have on the Substack soon from yesterday with one of the new schools we're working with. The teacher we have an exercise where the teacher had written an NPPBN sequence for the topic. This case was linear equation, learning what a linear equation is. And then we'll usually take that and we'll make our modifications to it so you can see them side by side and little changes we'd make, as well as contrasting that with an original that we've made. So again, you can see more variation. And I looked again at the one I'd created and realized even I definitely improved upon it, but still just managed to catch a problem. So the sequence is logically faultless if there is one and one only interpretation that is logically consistent with what's been presented. And that is how you get towards guaranteed success. There's no other way anyone in the room can possibly conceive of what you've said. It has to be whatever you wanted them to learn. And that is entirely achievable for pretty much everything we teach. And I'd made one tiny slip by just modifying his and just about caught it, which meant there were two. There were two interpretations, not more than that, but there were two. And you realized, I've been speaking with teachers about it today, when you think about it, it's now random which way the kids lie. Half of them might get it right, and half of them might land on the other side and develop a misconception because of my teaching there. But let's say take the case where 29 of them get it right and one of them lands on the misconception. And then you test them all with mini whiteboards, and that one kid keeps getting it wrong. And I've asked 3 people so far to spot what's wrong with this. And in a calm, safe environment where they've got all the time in the world, they can't spot it. So imagine, are you likely to spot it when you're in the middle of a stressful classroom with all eyes on you? And so you look at it and you'll think, well, that looks perfect to me. And every other kid's got it. So, I mean, I don't want to say it out loud, but it seems like maybe the problem is it's not me. It's not them. Maybe the problem is. And here we get that sort of slightly insidious those insidious thoughts that we know they're there, but none of us are prepared to say them out loud. And it's because we cannot possibly fathom how there could be any other reason that kid's got it wrong, except either, best case scenario, you're mucking around, you weren't paying attention when I told you to, that's the problem, you didn't behave properly. Or it's just something you're just not as bright as the other ones, as the fact maybe we'll move you down a set. And it's so sad because it is entirely a consequence of the teaching. So that's kind of what I want in the beginning, is that logically faultless communication. So I'm not going to get that anywhere. That's guaranteed. Next, for the practice, for the independent practice, up until eventually we can completely randomize it, and that's totally fine because they should have fully generalized, fully embedded everything. Should be no issue. But there's a journey to get to that point. And along the way, I want things that are perhaps not fully generalized or randomized, and they're designed according to a certain structure. There's no way I'm getting that out there either. So I either do what Duncan says, and I spend 30 hours producing 6 hours worth of content. I've been doing an awful lot of that. Or maybe AI can give us something new. So that's probably first and foremost, that's probably what brings me to it. The hope and the promise that AI can I just give it a few instructions and it turns out loads of this stuff. Even better if it's beautifully formatted, one shot, and I can just use it. That's the dream. But I think along the way, the second thing I found it phenomenally useful for is as a thought partner. And I suppose that is solving the problem of the problem that resource creation solves is obvious. I suppose this one is solving the problem of, do you know what? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. You know, is that a vector? Yes or no? Is that a bearing? I don't know. I need somebody to talk to. Who can I talk to? And as much as with the AI, we might run into issues with reliability, I found there are ways to push it in the direction of you can probably have 98% confidence in it, maybe more. And it can even do things like, if I decide I'm going to take a math fact, and I'm going to simplify it so it's language I can use immediately without loads more explanation, I might then run it past the AI and say, look, is this true? If this is real truth, is this true enough? And see what it says in response. So there's that. We can get into the details of what I use it for, but there's lots of other things we can use it for that go down the route of thought partner. Just help me out with something related to this. So those are 2 things that bring me to it. And of those 2, it does one of them, I think, extremely well. And I'm reminded, I love the term that Neil Almond used. What was it? New technology becomes, what's the language he used? Ecological.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever there's this assumption that you can just take technology away if we decide not to use it anymore. I always felt there was something wrong with people who were saying during the pandemic and the lockdowns, oh, look, we all managed to not fly and drive around for a few weeks, so we can do it so intuitively. But no, we accepted it under really special circumstances. And I think Neil Allman's language there, that new technology is ecological, is the thing. You can't take it away because it becomes a part of our environment and we become used to it and very dependent on it. And it's how we're going to live now. Take away our smartphones, most of us, oh, we're going to crumble. Even if we're not smartphone addicts, we use them for a lot of practical things every day. AI has become like that for me now. I use it multiple times every day. I don't know what would happen if you took away my ChatGPT account. I don't know how it functioned. We probably wouldn't have been able to build unstoppable learning without it. I think it's been absolutely essential. So there are, for these two things, one, it does really well, and one, I'm not there with it yet. Not fully. And of the two, you probably guess, Thought Partner, I think it does phenomenally well. The resource creation, I'm still not there yet. But Duncan's a real master of this. So it's always like fascinating to hear his thoughts on it.
Okay, this is good. Good tee up as well, Kris. I like this. You're a pro at this these days. Duncan, can I just ask, before we get into the weeds of this, so I saw some of your earlier attempts at this. I think maybe you reached out to Jo Morgan and she shared something on Maths Gems, maybe a year or so ago, something like that. And one thing that struck me about it, I forget the exact topic, but the real thing that struck me is you'd broken it down. Maybe it's expanding brackets or something like that. And you'd broken it down into real, what Kris would potentially call atoms. They were really, really kind of minute skills. Yeah. So what you certainly weren't having was a 10-question exercise where you were going from x plus 1 times x plus 3 into brackets. By the time you got to question 10, there was 3 minus 4x brackets, whatever. You were hammering one thing, then hammering another, another. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And then obviously having followed Kris's work for many, many years, I definitely saw parallels, but also I saw differences. So there was certainly no NPPPN stuff going on. There was none of that. So I'm interested, how closely aligned were your two approaches in your opinion, Duncan? And then how's this kind of potential partnership, as it seems to be the case, how's this come about?
Yeah, so I mean, I think if I'm going to answer the question in a slightly different way. So those first resources and all the resources I'm making now, what I am absolutely not doing is having AI, as it were, plan the resources for me. The planning in terms of the decisions around what the sections are and the choice of questions, and that is me doing that, right? So, and I was doing that on PowerPoint 5 years ago. It's just that it's deeply, deeply inefficient. So for me, AI is the tool to make the resources of my dreams, as it were. What AI is not doing is spitting out these, I think, well-structured resources. And I think if we want to use that language of like the thought partner that Kris is talking about, my process is definitely, I will, whenever I'm kind of trying to, map out a sequence of learning or a lesson or whatever it is, I will record myself, just literally just do a brain dump as I think through the lesson. And then I'll have ChatGPT spit me back out the lesson plan, but not as latex code. I'll just go through a few iterations of like, right, what is the choice of examples? What is the structure of this lesson? And then when I'm at a point when I'm happy with that, that's when I'll get to the production of a PowerPoint or a worksheet. So it's not, what definitely isn't happening is I just type into my phone, I want an atomized worksheet about expanding brackets, and it's spitting me out something perfect. It's still a, mildly time-consuming process, but I've also got, a few things. Firstly, I've got very quick at doing it. Secondly, I think possibly unlike Kris, and maybe this is where he's going wrong, I don't know, is I've got lots of projects set up now where I've saved prompts. So because AI knows exactly what I'm asking, it's able now to spit me things out within, literally minutes that once took me 2 or 3 hours to make even something passable. So I've sort of slightly gone off topic and slightly forgotten exactly what you asked me, but I think that gives it, yeah.
Yeah, can I just drill into this? Because again, as I say, my listeners, and I say my listeners, it's me more than anyone, loves getting into the weeds, the practicalities here. So a few questions on this process, because I'm fascinated by this. So you say you record yourself. So can you give us an example of this? Is it like your audio recording into your phone, and then is that straight into ChatGPT or whatever? Or are you doing that in a voice transcription thing, then uploading the text file? Just talk us through the weeds of this.
Yeah. So I think, for full disclosure, I am paying for ChatGPT. I am paying for Claude as well. And I'm also paying for Overleaf. So the total cost of that is probably to the tune of about £45, £50 a month, which, I recognize for some listeners might be an outlay that they don't feel comfortable with. For me, I feel that I'm able to pay that, and I am paying for that. So that's, get that on the table straight away. So for me, I find ChatGPT seems to be better at the thought partner side of things, in my experience. Claude, I'm not using Gemini because it's blocked at our school, but Claude appears to be better at churning out code. So the process, in the practical terms, and I've evolved this process over years, right? So what I'm describing now is a process that I've refined over probably a two to 3 year period. So it hasn't always been like this. But my process now is I have a project in ChatGPT which has all my my schemes of learning uploaded into it, so it knows what my sequence of lessons is going to be. I also have a generic little description of what I'm trying to achieve saved in a Word document, which I have had ChatGPT write for me to explain it back to itself. So before I begin my word dump, I copy and paste my kind of generic spiel into my ChatGPT project to say, just to remind my project what it is I'm about to do.
And what kind of things in that? What kind of things are in that, Duncan?
I can send it to you, but it just says something like, you are a lesson compiler. Your job is to take the brain dump of a maths teacher and structure it into a choice of examples, instructions for students. It's probably about 3 or 4 pages long, but it describes what the output that I'm expecting from my brain dump is, basically.
Interesting. Again, I'm fascinated by it. Sorry, we're never going to get anywhere beyond this tonight. This has got 16-hour miniseries written all over it. This, from my limited experience, although I am a bit of a geek with this kind of stuff, of the kind of prompt creation here, what I've certainly found is like examples of excellence, for want of a better phrase, seem to be the key to this. Is that embedded there? So have you got some examples of the kind of thing you want?
Absolutely. So in my prompt to process my word dump, I've got a description of how I want it to process my word dump, and then a couple of successful examples of a word dump transformed into an output. And then so I take all of that, copy and paste it into my project every single time before I begin my word dump. Now, I'm not sure if this is something other people have experienced or not, but both in different ways, all the large language models that I've worked with seem to benefit from not letting an individual chat go on for too long. So I'm not quite sure why. I don't know enough about the tech of it, but for some reason, if you save loads of chats within a project, but every time you want to start again, start a new chat, because for some reason, after about 3 or 4 lessons, it starts doing rogue things. I don't really know why that's the case, but I just find it
I've seen that, so I do a lot of creating artifacts on Claude, which again, we've talked about this, but if listeners aren't aware, I kind of like mini kind of web apps and stuff, and you'll state something really early on as one of the key criteria in the first kind of iteration of the prompt, and then it'll screw something up and you chatting back and forth, and then later on it'll have completely forgotten that first bit. Like it was literally I put in capital letters, and that's gone out of its head straight away. So it definitely gets worse the longer you get down a chat. I've definitely noticed that. That's interesting. Tell me, Duncan, what's this word dump? So what kind of things are you saying here?
So and again, the word dump is something that is evolving, but I will do something like, I say, right, I want to do a lesson on, I don't know. So for example, something I taught today was I did a lesson where I was trying to the lesson was about identifying the conditions for applying for identifying the conditions for collecting like terms, basically. Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to do a lesson on when is it a like term, when is it a not. So the kind of brain dump I have, I'll be like, right, I want a lesson with this title. I want the lesson to follow this structure. I want 2 pre-populated examples. Then I want 2 examples which are left for me to live model. Then I want 6 questions which progress in this order of difficulty. So I'm talking. I'm not. The prompt I'm giving is detailed. It's probably a
Yes.
a 5-10 minute
Wow.
explanation in a lot of detail, but that's coming from my brain, as it were. The AI is not doing that bit for me. And then what it does is it takes my prompt. I've basically spoken through every single slide that I want,
Yep.
or every single element of the worksheet.
And
that
sorry,
I say I
Doug, you're
want
doing this straight into ChatGPT, are you?
straight into ChatGPT. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll put in my prompt. I'll say, can you just confirm for me that you understand what we're doing? It will say, yes, I understand. And then I'll do my brain. I'll just record myself. I'll speak into it, probably 5-10 minutes. And then it will spit me out usually. And because I've got a project going and because I've got a prompt that I've refined over a number of months now, it will usually spit me out something pretty close to what I wanted straight away. But the key thing is I don't just then take that and not look at it. I will go through and check, is that the example I thought it was? Is it not? Like, I really do look through it. So that's sort of part 1, I suppose.
Right, let me pause you there. So I want to bring Kris back in 1 sec, but just one question on this. What's the output? Sorry, is that as a kind of PowerPoint? Is it as a PDF? Well, what's it looking like?
The output at that point is just completely the text within ChatGPT.
Yep,
It's
yep.
nothing but a slide. Slide 1, example 1 is this.
Okay.
Example
It's
2 is this.
describing what's on it.
Describing what's on it. Yeah, that's it.
Fascinating. Right, Kris, let me bring you in there. Have you experimented with this? Because this has never occurred to me to just chat into it. Because I kind of think better when I'm writing. I mean, listeners will have known over the last however many years I talk nonsense. The more I talk, the less sense I'm making here. So what are you doing? Are you doing this? Have you experimented?
So first, that question about doing rogue things if you let it go on too long, I think I might know why that is. I've got a hypothesis anyway. So when I built a prototype product off the back of ChatGPT the start of this year, and when you do that, you're not using it. Sorry, it wasn't off the back of ChatGPT, it was off the back of GPT, because ChatGPT is the product that OpenAI have built that uses their GPT LLM. And I didn't even use it in the end. I actually used the Claude API. So when you do this, you're not interacting with the products as most users will be anymore. You're interacting with what they call the API, which is a bit of software. And there's a little bit of code that says, look, if you enter this code into your code for your product, and there are these like bits that you can adjust, and you can adjust them in these ways. If you do that, and then this last one is your message, and you stick whatever you want in between quote marks for your last bit, which is your message, and then you can send it to our API, and our API will send you back a response from the Claude LLM. And you can present that however you want in your product. Develop your own user interface, do whatever you want with it. So all these AI products you see out there, they're all based on the same tiny number of LLMs, and every single one of them is it's referred to as a wrapper, but it's like a product on top of these things using their APIs. So I was doing that, and the first thing that shocked me about this is I automatically assumed that the API would function a bit like the ChatGPT experience, that you send a message and then it would reply, and then you send a new message and it remembers everything that went before and responds to what's coming next. And it turns out that's not what happens. So the LLM is what they described as stateless. Stateless is the word. It just resets itself every single time. So if you send it a message via the API and it gives you a response, it immediately forgets that you ever had a conversation. And so the way you build this chat function is in your next message, you have to append everything that was said before. There are ways you can code it so that all of that remains hidden and it just sends its new response. You only display the new response. Then, and in the interface, you only see the new bit of your message appear as well. And it keeps appending the back message. So we know that LLMs, well, I assume most people who've looked at this know at this point, LLMs have a token limit. There's a limit to how much they can process in one go. We think we're sending a short message, but we're sending a short message plus everything we've said before. Now, it used to be that ChatGPT just cut out and just went, we can't do it after a while. I think they're doing some kind of clever coding on the back end so that it never does that anymore. It always allows you to keep talking to it, but there is still a token limit. So my guess is that once you breach that limit and it doesn't tell you you have any more, it just starts sort of strategically dropping off certain bits of the message that it hasn't been using very frequently. So you think it's there in the log and it'll remember and it doesn't. And hence the weird behavior. That's my bet. Am I
That's
making any
interesting.
sense there with that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Just on a little personal level. So I'm using ChatGPT. I'm using Claude. I'm using Gemini. We have Gemini at work. We get Gemini Pro, but I'm just on the free versions of the other two for now. ChatGPT, certainly in the last few weeks, it knows me better than my wife knows me. Right. So I'm cracking open a new chat about just something random, and then it'll be like, oh, of course, there's a 43-year-old man who's essentially a maths geek who's conscious about health and all. Like, bloody hell. So it's definitely remembering, it's linking things together in a way that it certainly wasn't before. But that's a really interesting insight, Kris.
It's all the product. So it's not the LLM, it's the
Yes.
product. And they're using classical programming techniques to do clever things, to store things in memory, and then clever things to trigger those memories. It's something called retrieval augmented generation, I think. When it thinks it'll be helpful. I mean, I have no idea exactly how they're doing it. The engineering behind it must be like brilliant, to be honest. But it means that what we think we're interacting with is not what we think we're interacting with.
Yeah.
It's all very black box, weird, magical. But you
Before,
also, sorry.
yeah, sorry. Before I go back to Duncan about for part two, was there anything else you wanted to reflect on that Duncan said there?
Well, you just asked if I'd chat into it. So do you
Yeah.
mean literally verbalizing?
Yeah.
All the time.
Do
I
you?
hate having to type into it. Oh yeah. So also ChatGPT probably has the better function there. So it uses Whisper AI, which is their own product, their own sort of AI thing. And it's extraordinary. There's nothing else like it. I mean, if I switch from English to French, it'll pick up that I'm speaking French and start typing out text in French. It will correct my grammar, my imperfect French grammar along the way. Even had fun so I'm trying to have a conversation with my Bulgarian friend where she gave me something to say in Bulgarian and I tried to say it and wouldn't pick up on what I was saying at all. And then she said, what I swear was the exact same thing, the exact same way. And it spat it out in Cyrillic. So yeah, it's just so much faster and easier. But to your point, speaking is a different cognitive function to writing. So when you speak, your words are never as well structured as they can be when you're writing. You can't see what you just said. You've got transient information, so you're trying to remember sort of phonological loop, what was said moments ago. You can't see it doesn't sort of dictate as you go along either. It basically takes an audio recording and then sends the whole thing to the AI, which then transcribes it back for you. So it is in many ways much easier, especially for the use case that Duncan described, where you kind of just want to ramble a load of really nitty, picky, specific details. Because if you can ramble and you can go all over the place, and it will figure it out. You don't need to actually communicate in a really clear, structured way, the way that you do for another person. It will pass your mad ramblings. Or my
That's
mad
my
ramblings.
that's my takeaway. I'm gonna try that. So I'll get back to you next time
That's brilliant.
next time we talk. Okay, oh, that's interesting. Right, Duncan, you've left us on a cliffhanger. So let me recap for the listeners. So you've got your project in ChatGPT. You've uploaded this kind of super prompt, and I'm going to come back to prompts a little bit later on. That's 5 or 6 pages. It's got what you're trying to achieve, and it's got this kind of examples of excellence. You've then done your brain dump describing perhaps what you're about to teach, a unit of work that's coming up, and it spat out descriptions of what could potentially be turned into a PowerPoint. Slide 1, it's going to have this. Slide 2, it's going to have this, and it's done this as text. So what do you do next?
I mean, it sort of depends. As I said, because I've refined this over a period of time, and I've got better at speaking myself as well and speaking a certain language. So I would say now we're probably at a pretty, the thing that it's spitting me out is probably pretty good. It probably doesn't need refining. If it does, then what I won't try and do is move on to the resource creation if I'm not happy with the plan that I've outlined. But let's assume, as it is kind of getting to now, that my brain dump has successfully churned me out a thing, a plan of a lesson that I like. That's when I then transfer to Claude. I find Claude is better at coding, And I basically have a second prompt, again, which is, in a Word document, pre-populated. This is a lot longer. It's probably about 40 pages, this prompt. And it's something I've developed over time. But basically what that does is, because my brain dump is being outputted in a very specific way, the second prompt that I have is taking my quite specific output and is able to understand it in a consistent way every single time. So I've got a project in Claude. I will I'll copy and paste my ChatGPT developed lesson plan into Claude. I'll then copy and paste my prompt into Claude. And I think for those of you who use Claude, what you have to do is you have to still type something. So when you copy and paste prompts into Claude, it will kind of understand them as an image. And then you need to still type a little something in the chat bar in Claude and say something like, "Hi, I posted you 2 prompts." And I'll always say, "Can you just confirm for me you understand what they're doing?" And it will say, "Yes, but I'm going to make you this." And I'll say, "Can you now output me whatever the code for my lesson?" And until very, very, very recently, I was getting it to output me latex code. I have, in the last 2 weeks, decided that actually, so within HTML, there is a latex module called MathJax. So you can write code that is a bit of latex and a bit of HTML to create things which are, in my opinion, amazingly good looking lessons, which I will share. I'll send to you, Craig, at the end of this recording, because this is something I've literally made over half term. So we're talking things that I've used 2 or 3 of live. So I've got a couple of years worth of worksheets which all look nice based from latex outputs, but I'm now moving towards hybrid latex HTML outputs. The advantage of that in terms of making lessons is that, and this is all just built into my prompts, if you are outputting it as latex code, you've got to download it, you've got to convert it to a PowerPoint, you've got to go in and put some animations in, you've maybe got to do a bit of adjusting. My HTML outputs have the animations pre-done for me. They've got timers inbuilt, so it's something much, much more sophisticated. And I have got to a point now where, that whole process that I've just articulated probably takes me 15, 20 minutes per lesson to whip up something that I think is really, really good. And half of that time is the brain dump of me just thinking what the lesson should be.
A couple of things on this. Well, three things really. So yeah, firstly, for the benefit of listeners, if you could just send us something to look at, that would be amazing. So that'll be in the show notes, listeners there. Secondly, so as you know, so I'd never even heard of latex, right, until about 6 months ago, and then I was tempted to get it tattooed on my arm because I was just saying it all the time. I was absolutely obsessed with latex, but all I was doing was exactly what you described there, getting it to spit out latex. I was copying the latex, pasting it into Overleaf, clicking recompile, downloading my PDF, having a look at it. Oh, that's not quite right. Back to Claude or whatever, tweak it and so on. And I was still blown away how fast it was, but sometimes it wasn't looking quite right. The page break was in the wrong place and so on. And when you're talking HTML, just on, again, I know very little about this. What's that outputting it as? Is that as a lesson? Are you doing for the worksheet element? Is that as HTML as well? How do you actually get it into its physical format?
Yeah. So the reason that ChatGPT can do this as well, but I just don't think it's as good. Within Claude, what Claude is calling an artifact, and I think ChatGPT calls its canvas function, but Claude is calling it an artifact. It spits it out in a kind of dual view, and you can just toggle between them. So one of the views is code, one of the views is the HTML itself, which basically functions like a website, and you can see your presentation live within Claude, the app, as it were. There are slightly more sophisticated HTML compilers than the one Claude has, just in terms of for example, I'm building a full screen toggle into all my lessons, so I'm wanting to use it outside of that to look really nice. But if depending on how sophisticated you want to get, basically you could just get your output completely within Claude and then have it as your lesson in there. In terms of saving it somewhere, you've got a couple of options, all of which I'm using for slightly different use cases. So there are lots and lots of online HTML compiling websites. So I'm using one called One Compiler, where I can just save all my a bit like Overleaf. So for listeners who aren't familiar, LaTeX is the coding language, and there are lots of compilers for LaTeX, Overleaf being the most popular. And I'm an Overleaf subscriber. One compiler is the same kind of thing for HTML. What you can also do in a much simpler kind of way on your standard, computer, Notepad, like the really kind of crappy, most basic text function, you can take HTML, copy it into Notepad, and do a save as .html. And then if you open it up in like an internet browser, so you right click, open in Internet Explorer, you will have your complete presentation. So when I send you something at the end of this, Craig, that's how you will have to open what I'm sending to you. I'm going to send you what looks like a Notepad file, but when you download it, if you right click, open in browser, you'll be able to see it as a fully functional, a presentation basically.
Yeah. All right. Exciting stuff. One more question for you, Duncan, then back to Kris. So you, in our kind of conversations we were doing, putting this episode together, you got excited because you discovered something new, and I think this might be something we're going to have to talk about in part 2. But one thing I noticed from that is you'd screenshotted some of your chats, and you do what I do. You're super polite, right? So I think you were chatting to Claude, and you were saying, just like a bit casual, any chance you're any good at this kind of stuff? And then you were like, nice one, capital letters, exclamation mark. Is that just you being a nice guy, or do you reckon you're getting better outputs if you're friendly to Claude? What do you reckon here?
Do you know what? I've got no idea, but probably better outputs if I'm being nice, but I've no idea.
It's good. No, I like that.
What I will say though is that I guess it goes back to that projects thing, and what is really useful is if you've been using a project for a while, get ChatGPT or Claude or whatever to say, can you write me a technical summary description of what this project is, and then get it to write its own summary and just periodically recopy its own summary back into itself, so it's constantly refining its own understanding of what it is. So I'm not sure it's about the politeness thing, but certainly getting to know you and who you are and what you're about, I think, probably can't help but be a good thing. But I might be talking rubbish.
That's really nice. Perfect. Right, Kris, I'm going to come back to you. And again, for the benefit of listeners here, normally, I love to do a 3-hour epic, but I've got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old just outside of my office. They're both on iPads. So if NSPCC want to get in contact again, feel free. So I reckon I've got about 10 minutes before a war erupts. So that's time for one more meaty question to both of you. So Kris, what I'm interested in, you mentioned that it's very good as a thought partner, but it's not quite there in terms of resource creation. What is it good at? What have you been impressed with, and where are the gaps? Where are the things that are lacking? And Duncan, I'm going to come to you with the same question, and I want to know whether you've experienced the same things.
So one of the key things whenever we're introducing a new topic, we want to give a sense of purpose to it, why it's worth learning this.
Yes.
And sometimes it's really hard to find, it's incredibly hard to find anything real world relevant. I'm making this up on the spot now, but I think maybe the idea of making things real world relevant is the worst idea anyone's had in education.
It's a big shout.
I'm just sort of flashing through because these things are incredibly important in the real world, but usually it's many levels more advanced than what we're doing in school. And then it's embedded with multiple other pieces of mathematics as well. So the stress of trying to find the use case in real life for what is quite often 2,000-year-old mathematics, sometimes 4,000-year-old mathematics we're teaching, is pretty tough. But what is really good is looking back. I just love the whole headache aspirin framework from Dan Mayer. And you can think of it in historical terms. Why did anybody think about this? Why did anybody ever care about this? So straight away, it's really good at answering that question for you.
And
when was this first?
Yeah, sorry, Kris. Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, so we have talked about headache aspirin before, but it's always worth revisiting. So I'm a huge fan of this. It's this idea of saying to students, why did this thing ever get invented? What was the need of it? Why do we bother factorizing a quadratic? What's the point? And Dan's idea here is if you create a little headache first, then students see the need for the thing that you're about to teach them. Now, I've messed around trying to get it to generate ideas for this headache aspirin, and I've had really mixed results on this, Kris. So what's the secret here? How are you getting it to get a good output?
Well, I've got like a general headache aspirin producer, which isn't that great yet. And they don't have to be historical. So a great one that Dan talks about is the dot picker. Just stick a load of dots on the screen and say, right, pick a dot, any dot. Don't lose it. There are a lot of dots there. Okay. Tell the person next to you which dot you picked and make sure that they know it's the right one. It's an impossible task. Lay a Cartesian plane over it and straight away you've got a reason to learn about that. So, nothing historical there. But sometimes I don't have good ones for those. And a quick easy win is often going into like negative numbers, for example. I think if you start talking about, the original use case for negatives was debt. Start talking about debt to a 10-year-old. Come on. It's quite tough. Whereas instead, this is one I'm thinking of putting on the Substack. We've got a story we built up that goes through, I don't know, it includes Brahmagupta and Descartes and is it Cauchy or Gauss and somebody else, like 4 different mathematicians. It's kind of like the history of people's interaction with negatives across time and why they were rejected. And the next thing is pretty good for as well as etymology. Etymology is really important. We ever pause to wonder why we call them positive and negative? So there's a reason. The word negative in Latin means to deny, and positive means real. And a lot of this is, I think, possibly, it's Descartes again, same guy who gives imaginary and real numbers, really unhelpful because they're both real. He didn't like negative numbers. He just thought they were useful fictions, is what he called them. So he didn't like them. So he called them, these are the ones I wish to deny, whereas the positives, but they're the real numbers. And I don't know which comes first, that or the modern use of positive and negative as good and bad, but he effectively thought of negative numbers as bad numbers. He said, the bad number, I'm going to teach you about the bad numbers today. So you can have a lot of fun with history and etymology, and it's very good at helping to do that. And then if you
sorry, Kris, when you say it's very good at it, how are you getting it good at that? Are you doing a similar thing to Duncan? Are you giving it a lengthy prompt and some examples?
No,
but what are you saying to it? But are you saying, like, headache aspirin? Are you saying Dan Mayer's headache aspirin? What are you doing there?
So in this case, I'm saying, tell me when negative numbers were discovered. Okay, what were the first thoughts around them? What problem did they solve that people were facing at the time?
Right.
And the thing is, it's immediately good at that. And then I might ask, well, why did they call them positives and negatives? It's immediately good at that. I might then say, okay, well, can you take everything I've said there and turn it into a 200-300 word story? And it'll do that for me. And, sometimes its stories are better than others. If you know just a tiny, tiny bit about story writing, probably the key thing is some kind of conflict, if you can get it in there. Say, okay, can you read character and conflict? Like, make this a central character, give it some conflict, let's go. And then you can introduce things with that. You want a graphic to go with it. It's really good at producing graphics when you don't care about detail. So make an image to go with the story. So you can have your image on the PowerPoint, you read out your 200-300 word story, you've got gripped kids. Right now you want to learn about negatives. So another thing, it is legitimate. I think it's legitimately good at this. And I think any teacher could use this. If you don't care about this perfect sequencing and all the stuff we're talking about, where your questions are doing an awful lot of instructional work, or your examples are doing a lot of instructional work, if you just want a bunch of stuff and you don't care about formatting, if you just want a few ideas, you can give it some reasonable constraints and say, give me 20 tasks like this one. And it will quickly generate them. They will be within the constraints you gave it. It'll generate the answers. You can take a quick screen grab of it and stick it on the slide and make it look, it'll be really ugly, but it doesn't matter. And that might still be better than a lot of what you might find elsewhere.
And when you say tasks, you're talking kind of like generate a worksheet, for example, is it like 20 questions?
That kind of thing. Yeah, exactly. I want 20 two-step equations, and I want you to make sure that 10 out of 20 of them have the unknown as the second term rather than just the first term. Actually, I want 5 out of 20 of them to have the x on the right hand, to have the unknown on the right-hand side, not just the left-hand side. And let's make sure that the first 5 of them have the x in the first term and it's on the left-hand side, and then from there we'll start to. So this is the bit where you can just chat to Whisper AI. You can ramble a bit like that. You can say, oh, hang on, actually, I don't want to do that. Go back. Scrap what I just said, and I want you to do this instead. And it just processes all that, and there's your 20 equations with the solutions all generated. You might then follow up with, can you give me the step-by-step worked solutions to that, please? And it'll generate that for you as well. And it'll look ugly as sin. It will, and it'll be a bit like randomly all over the place. This is fine when you're essentially doing independent practice of retrieval. So the kids can already do it, and the kids are pretty good at having generalized to all these different cases. It's just practice. So you know what? Maybe it's not 20, maybe it's just 5, but I want 5 every day for the next 2 weeks that they can do as they do now when we come in. It's that kind of thing, it'll do in ChatGPT. It'll do in free ChatGPT, probably. Like anyone could do that. So I think that's really good, especially for number and algebra. When you get to things that are visual, some of the stats stuff, some of the geometry stuff, that's where it gets trickier. You probably have to start doing more of the stuff Duncan's talking about. And there are simpler ways of doing it, again, if you don't care about the format, the output. We had one parent over the summer who specifically wanted extra work for their kid to do around area, and we had them prepped for this particular type of area. So it was like compound shapes. And I wanted the atom on, okay, so you've got almost like lengths of lines. I just wanted them two or three horizontal lines, and two horizontal lines, and you're working the different. I'm picturing an L shape. I don't know if this makes sense.
Yeah, they're like the missing length that you have to work out.
Exactly. Yeah. It was actually pretty good at generating the LaTeX for that quite quickly. Stick in overleaf. We've got 20 questions we can practice with. Okay, now I want the shapes to look like this. Now I want to remove that. Like, it was actually okay at doing that, but it wasn't very well formatted. So I think those are probably some of the. What else are they good for? I mean, okay, so secret ones is a good example, right? So almost probably every single curriculum you'll find out there will still have all the number ones, coefficients of 1, powers of 1, ones in the denominator. They'll always be secret still. They'll be covert. So you could even take a page out of any curriculum you want. You could put a photograph of it into ChatGPT and say, reproduce this, but I want all the secret ones to be revealed. And it will do that, which is pretty easy. Well, one of the things Duncan discovered, which I think he said might be for part 2, it's phenomenally good at producing interactive widgets, if you've got a use for that.
Big teaser there. Yeah, we're building an episode around that. Don't you worry about that. Yep.
I think there's also a reason why it's very good at producing those, which maybe we save for episode 2 as well. What's that? I think, yes, sense checking your own explanations. I think I mentioned this earlier, and your own understanding. So it's a bit, 98%, I think it's pretty good at this. So Lee's mentioned this. A lot of the teachers we work with mention it. Once you start thinking atomically, you realize you maybe don't know what the thing is. Like you're not as sure as you were. So Lee had that great example of bearings and just this whole departmental level conversation going on for an hour about but is it a bearing? Is that a bearing? If that happens, is that a bearing? Is 360, is that a bearing? And it's actually pretty good, I think, at sense checking these things. So I'll ask it these questions, and then sometimes I'll force it to search online. So I'll say, double check your answer, and they'll force it to source online or search online to find evidence that backs up what you're saying, that kind of thing. I think it's like 98% good. The reason for the equivocation is mainly because it did eventually convince me that you cannot describe the absolute value of a negative number as its modulus. And it said, I really stress tested it, but it was pretty emphatic. Modulus refers to vectors only. When it's a negative, you have to talk about the absolute value. And then just this morning or yesterday, because I was working on negatives again, I asked it about that. It was like, no, you can refer to the absolute value as the negative. So, no, but hang on, because we had this conversation before and you told me that. I was like, well, you're actually very, very smart, Kris. And it was brilliant insight that you've had. And I am very, very proud of you that you thought to raise that with me. And actually, if you want to be real, it kind of argued that if you want to be super precise and technical, then it claims in sort of high level advanced vector mathematics, you would reserve the word modulus for just that. But then it also argued, look at this level, it's probably fine in its common usage. Okay. So you get those little things, but I think that's way better than nothing. Just me on my own, or me Googling. Oh my God, it's a whole other world compared to Googling. And in some ways, it's even better than having another smart maths teacher with you, because they find out that they're not sure very often, and the two of you can interrogate it together and see, do you agree with what it's saying and its reasons for saying it. So it's great for sense checking your own understanding. And I think also, as I mentioned, my own explanations, when I try to simplify how I'm describing something, it's like, is this still valid? Is this true? Is this not? And sometimes it'll correct me and be like, not really, because of these reasons. And then I can choose, do I accept your argument, ChatGPT, or do I not? And
That's good.
those
All right.
all have the benefit of it can do them out the box.
Fantastic. Right, I'm going to hand last word over to you, Duncan, and it's the same question. But before I do, I just want to say some things I've found. So, I have this model of what a learning episode, to use Mark McCourt's terminology, and what I've been messing around with is trying to get it to generate all different phases of the learning episode. So the purpose phase, using things like headache, aspirin, etymology, and so on. Like Kris, I found it to be pretty good there. Actually breaking a routine, well, helping me choose a good first example for the routine. I think it's pretty good at that, breaking the routine into atoms and this is a whole other thing I want to talk to you about in probably episode 2 or 3. Just the the ownership and the kind of the moral of kind of training it on other people's resources to be able to enable it to do things. So I had an interesting email exchange with somebody about that, so we'll put a pin in that one. But I found it to be good at lots of bits of it. But coming up with good verbal explanations for the I do, all those kind of things. Diagrams, I'm still struggling, right? So if I'm getting it to do a Pythagoras worksheet and I want the triangles orientated, not so like the horizontal and vertical, that flipping right angle symbol, God almighty, something that's floating around outside the bloody triangle, it's all over the show. So that's where I found the biggest stumbling block is the geometry. Well, anytime it needs a diagram. But Duncan, final word over to you. What is it amazing at, and where's it still lacking?
I think what it's amazing at is acting as a starting point for your resource, or it's amazing at teaching me or a person how to code to make maths resources. So I think the way to think about this is what I am not doing really anymore is purely using AI to generate me code. What I've done over a period of time is got AI to teach me how to code to make a maths resource. And I think it's quite an important and subtle difference. So, I'm in this new phase where I think HTML with latex is the future, but that's my new discovery at the moment. So let's focus on latex, which I have learned really well now. When I first discovered it, I kind of thought, oh, right, well, this is amazing. There'll probably be loads of math teachers who have been doing this for ages, because it should be a kind of industry standard kind of thing, given how much better it is than something rubbish in PowerPoint. And I was quite surprised to find that that's not the case. So what AI has been amazing at is teaching me how to make latex code. And now I know how to use it such that I could probably generate a lot of what I'm doing myself at a much, much slower speed. But my knowledge of it has evolved kind of as the AI has taught me how to do it. And I think a really, really practical tip that people might find useful is most coding languages have a function built in where you can write little notes within the code. And the one that's in latex is anything that's wrapped within a percentage symbol. It doesn't code it. It colors it in green and it explains to you what's going on. So a really powerful thing to do is when you get a large language model to write you some code, add in a little caveat that says, can you, in percentage notes, explain to me what each bit of the code is doing? Or you could get it to say, right, can you highlight to me the areas of this code where I could change and see a change in the display? So really simple as an example, that would be like, if you've got something in columns, it can highlight to you, right, what number do you have to change in the code to change the number of columns? And so I have learned to use latex by using it as an interactive training tool, basically. And I guess kind of going back to where we started, this is not going to be a use case for 90% of teachers, right? There are in any given school, you're going to have a huge range of people with different interests, different motivations, different skill sets, different roles that they play. And I definitely don't envisage a world or would expect a world where 100% of teachers are making 100% of resources from scratch. That is not desirable. But you are going to get, in any given school, a percentage of people, or in any given, set of maths teachers, a percentage of them who are massive losers, like everyone who's in this podcast, who really, really love thinking about maths teaching and making resources, and that's what they're really passionate about. And for that subset of people, they should be learning how to do this so that they can make resources of a really high quality. And if I go back to my use case in school, what I am trying to do is create a suite of resources that are, robust and deliverable and scalable, such that someone who is not going to spend the time listening to hours and hours of the Kris Boulton podcast about atomization, but could pick up a really high quality resource, is going to be able to get 85% of the benefit because the resource itself is so good. So I think, in answer to your question about what is AI really good at, it's an interactive training tool. That's how I think you should be thinking about it. And in terms of the use case for that, I think there should be, and there is going to be, a small percentage, but a non-trivial number of people who are going to be sufficiently interested in learning how to do these things to produce really high quality resources. Now, for me, I've probably spent, every Sunday for the last couple of years, I will stick on Sky Sports. I'll watch all the football matches, possibly have a beer in the afternoon, and just do loads and loads of coding. And I found that pleasurable and relaxing, but also beneficial for my own, teaching practice. And I've got a whole suite of resources which are better than what I had a couple of years ago. And there's going to be lots of people for whom, they are prepared to spend their Sundays making resources in this kind of way. And for those people that aren't prepared to do that, hopefully they're going to get from me or someone in their department something really, really top tier that they can go and deliver.
That's fantastic. Right. As much as it pains me, we're going to put a pause in it there, but let's tease what else we want to discuss. So I want to get a bit philosophical about this in part 2. I want to discuss who is it right to train? Can we just take resources freely available off the internet to use it to train to create better resources? Because, as I say, I've got an interesting conversation I've been having about that. Want to go back to your point there, Duncan, that you've made about, is this a good thing just to have 2 or 3 one or 2 teachers in a school, or maybe just 1 or 2 teachers in the UK creating this suite of resources for everybody that everybody's just using? Is that good for the profession, bad for the profession? Is it good for learners? Is it bad for learners? And Kris, what I'm also interested from you is where this sits for you in terms of atomization and creating all those categorical MPPN sequences and all those things. And yeah, God, there's absolutely loads of, we'll do well to fit this into part 2. Let's put it that way. Right. One more shout out. I was giving Lee Wheeler a hard time at the start of this podcast, but he has a Substack. I linked to his, and it's fascinating. I love Substacks from maths teachers who are in the classroom. Lee's got a great one, so I'll link to that. And Duncan, if you can send me some stuff over, I'll link to that in the show notes. Kris, as always, I'll link to Unstoppable Learning website and newsletter. And we'll be back, possibly with Lee, possibly with Duncan. Maybe Kris will make a new friend and we'll have them on the show. Who knows next time, but we'll definitely be back. Kris Boulton, it's been amazing speaking to you. Same to you, Duncan Grantham. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.
Brilliant.
Cheers.
Bye.